This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to the Great Love Debate, the world's number one dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, we are here at the very fancy studios of Pod Populi, podcasts for the people. It is really quite lovely and luxurious in here, I gotta say, because trust me, I have recorded podcasts every possible way, every possible place, on a phone, in a coffee shop in Shanghai, and even most of the time in a really professional studio. When possible, if you have the means, choose the studio. And I'm doing this podcast solo today. I've done more solo podcasts this year, I think, than in the prior 7 years of this podcast combined. And some of you like that, and some of you don't. And there's a lot of reasons for me doing it. Maybe I'm a little more introspective. Maybe I have a few more things I want to say. Maybe after doing this for a long time, I have my thoughts together with a little more clarity. And maybe I've just spent more time alone and it's worked out that way, which is not necessarily a good thing. You know, the older you get, I think the less you like that. I think it goes the other way. I think the more you sort of appreciate being with someone or someone's as much as someone can. So I'm starting another new podcast in the new year. It's called The Non-Parent's Guide to Parenting. It's co-hosted by the very talented and wise Tiffany McDonald, who you have heard on this podcast a few times. She's a co-host on the Crazy Rich Neighbors podcast, which is number one in about 7 different countries right now. And she's like me. She is also without kids, which gives her a unique perspective and a sense of humor and some wisdom and some thoughts on what parents and kids are doing right and wrong. It will be semi-smart alecky take on all things raising kids and parenting. So check that one out as it goes up. It's going up in about 2 weeks from the time this one drops. So I don't know when you're listening to this one, but find it. So why do I bring that up today? Because, excuse me, one of the things that we will talk about on that show is one of the things I want to talk about on this show. No, not kids and parenting. On that show, one of the things we talk about, or will talk about, is when to speak up and what to speak up about. And over the last year, speaking of those parents, I've watched a lot of moms and dads basically lose their fucking minds, caring about the wrong things, getting in arguments about stupid things, ignoring important things, and forgetting about the right things. And typically, in normal times, a parent would get on the phone and scream at their kid's soccer coach if their kid wasn't getting enough playing time. That was a common thing. That was a normal thing. That was a weird, crazy thing, but lots of parents did it, and it just happened, and it was part of our societal angst. Yet, if, as has happened, the school was closed down for weeks or months or a year because of COVID fears or school board policies, real or imagined, a lot of parents would say, oh, well, I guess that's just how it is. Which is absolutely mind-boggling to me, how things that truly matter either wouldn't or haven't been getting a rise out of moms and dads, or because they tell me these things, they're afraid to say something because of what someone else might think. We're literally only talking about the health, welfare, and future sanity of their children and their education. So you would think that that stuff was a bit more important than whether or not their kid made the cheerleading team. No, doesn't seem to be, because too many were too silent. So what does that have to do with dating and or relationships? Well, it's really about speaking up. And I'm always amazed at the things that we tend to let go, and I'm equally baffled by the things we really want and don't get. We are constantly living and stuck in this gray area when it comes to love and feelings and needs of what I call too much and never enough, which is an impossible place to exist, yet we all spend an inordinate amount of time there. So I wanted to ask why and what for. A lot of people have asked me at our live shows or in person over the years, what do you look for in a girl? And I always answer simply that she likes me. Because to me, everything else is negotiable. If that's a starting point, that she likes me, that's what I look for. Yes, it's kind of a quippy, smart-ass answer, but it also is really true. If she likes me, I'm pretty much good. But in my years of dating, I stayed in relationships or kept dating people when I'm not quite sure that they didn't really like me, or I'm quite sure that they didn't really like me. That was my double negative there. I'm quite sure that they didn't really like me, and I'm absolutely positive they didn't love me. So why did I do that? Why do any of us do that? Was I getting just this flicker every once in a while, once a week, twice a week of hope or affection or effort? And every once in a while, that let me know that it was a possibility of, oh, yeah, they might feel the way I want them to, even though it wasn't a probability. I mean, you could try this out. Go into a dark room and flip the lights on for a second and then turn them off. You saw a light, right? So you think the light definitely exists. But is that the normal? Is the light usually on? And in that flicker, was it enough light to really see anything? And the answer is no. But because we know there is light and we saw it, we're like, aha, there was light. That somehow, some way, that there's current flowing into the socket and the filament in the bulb. Is that what it's called? A filament? Do we have a licensed electrician around here at this fancy studio? I don't know. Anyway, we think a light is on simply because a light exists or existed, and it can be on, and we have seen it on, which makes us ignore the norm, which is the darkness. Does that make sense? I'm going to get into this. We have to keep the lights on in this fancy studio. So we have to take a quick break to pay for these lights and a whole lot of other things. So we will be back right after this. And we are back. I mentioned this a few weeks ago because it was an interesting proposition, and I'm not entirely sure still what the answer is. Would you rather be with someone who likes you 20% less than you want or need? Or would you rather be with someone that you liked 20% less, but who absolutely adored you? So let me ask that question again, because I think I botched it. And it's a complicated question, and it's definitely not an easy answer. Would you rather be with someone who likes you 20% less than you want or need? Or would you rather be someone that you liked 20% less, but who absolutely adored you? Neither one of those is ideal. One is giving too much of something you don't necessarily need, and one is never enough of something that you definitely do. And I guess that depends on how you're wired. But I'm really not sure what the answer is. I've asked that question of a number of people over the last few weeks, and I've gotten all sorts of answers, which means a few things. A, it means it's a really good fucking question. And we're in the business of asking good questions. But it also means that it's rarely a perfect fit between two people. Would you rather be adored by the B+ or sort of liked by the A+? That's a tough question because it's kind of a tricky scenario. And how do you give what the other person wants? The other person needs time and touch and affection and intimacy and sharing and honesty and a whole lot of fun and hopefully laughs and lots of memories. Hopefully. That's what you should both want. So this isn't a love language thing. This is more like a love stew, a love, a melange of love, and everything should go into it. Like paella. Everything should go into it. But what happens when a few ingredients are missing? Or they're not in there quite to the degree that you want them to be? What then? What happens then? Because people make excuses all the time. I'm focused on my kids or my job or myself or school or whatever, but it really comes down to what they think is important. The parents that I talked about at the top of the show who yell at the soccer coach for more playing time for their kids, they found the time to do that. They thought that was important. They mustered up that passion in that moment to have that conversation. They weren't too busy for that. Mattered to them. When something matters, when someone matters, time or circumstance or difficulty, those things tend to fade away into the background. If you want something enough, you make it work. If you do the work and the other person doesn't want you enough, you have to decide if you're too much is never going to be enough. Because perfect balance is never going to exist in a relationship. But you have to do some work to create boundaries around your balance. You have to find, what I call an imperfect balance. The seesaw. Is that what it's called? The seesaw thing goes up and down? Teeter-totter? Seesaw should be exactly that. It's rarely completely even. You rarely stop at that 180-degree horizontal line. It's rarely perfectly there. But it's consistently going back and forth in this rhythm. And you don't, if you're a good person, jump off and slam the other person to the ground. You gently have these ebbs and flows and try and balance your weight, and you always try to keep that tipping point sort of just off of center. But the problem is if the sea never saws, or the saw never sees, it goes one way, and it's basically just a slide, and it's consistently tilting down. Now, you probably can't have it all in life. There's always some sacrifices and corner cuts, but can you have it all in a relationship? I don't know. Or is it always just some degree of too much or never enough? That's kind of what I'm asking here. I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I'm telling you what to feel. Does this feel right? Does this feel too far unbalanced? Would more of this make up for less of that? Can I find enough of what I need over there to make up for what I might never get over here? It's risks, it's choices, it's decisions, and it's all very stressful and a lot of times confusing. It's essentially one big game show. Is what you have better than what's behind door number 2? Or is what you have better than any door you have ever opened, but is this the best door that exists in the history of doors? Are there better doors? Comparing to what you have known is one thing, but comparing to what you've never had and that might not even exist, that's a whole nother thing in mind game that you have to play with yourself, and maybe we shouldn't. Because you got to ask, what is worth getting worked up about? And what is worth speaking up about? And what's worth worrying and sacrificing for? Bird in the hand? Maybe. Roll the dice on blowing it up, and maybe it gets better if you say something or do something? Probably. So, good poker play. I always like to use a good card analogy, but poker players, the good ones, they have tremendous patience. It's a really good attribute if you are a poker player. Money management's a good thing. The ability to read people is a good thing, but patience is a really valuable thing when it comes to poker. A good poker player, often, they will sit at the table for hours and hours and hours and just keep chucking their cards down, hand after hand, fold, 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 fold. And every once in a while, they'll get something. Not the perfect hand, but sort of a hopeful one. Ooh, I got 2 queens. And they will bet. And they will raise. And they'll try to push the game in the direction they want to go. That's kind of what this is. That's dating. And when everything is lined up and they believe they have the perfect hand, or at least the one they believe they can win, they go all in. And they want the other player to go go all in too.